It was Jesus' last trip to Jerusalem. He had just raised his friend Lazarus from the dead, and he was welcomed into Jerusalem, hailed as the King of Israel and the Savior. Jesus went into the temple again and threw out the money changers, and he had a few things to say to the Jews while he was there. He prayed to God and asked for God to glorify his name, and Jehovah actually spoke from the heavens and said, "I have glorified it and will glorify it." And people there in the courtyard thought it had thundered, some of them anyway. And others said, "No, an angel has spoken to him." And Jesus said, "This voice has occurred not for my sake, but for yours." And Jehovah was bearing witness that Jesus was his son. Well, Jesus went on to say that this is in the 12th chapter of John. He says, "Now there is a judging of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out." We all know who the ruler of this world is, do we not? It is Satan the devil, the one whom Jesus identified as the father of the lie. It explains a lot about why this world is the way it is, because Satan is still the ruler of the world. He has not been cast out yet. And then Jesus said, "And yet I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all sorts of men to myself." What did he mean? Well, it goes on to say, this he was saying to indicate the sort of death he was about to die. He was referring to himself being lifted up, nailed to a stake. And the crowd listening to him knew that. The crowd answered him, "We heard from the law that the Christ remains forever. How can you say that the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man?" So Jesus said to them, "The light will be among you a little longer. Walk while you have the light, so that the darkness does not overpower you. Whoever walks in the darkness does not know where he is going. While you have the light, exercise faith in the light, so that you may become sons of light." Jesus said these things and went off and hid from them. Well, that's an interesting expression, isn't it? Walk while you have the light. Shortly thereafter, Jesus was put to death, and it literally turned dark. While he was hanging there on the stake, the sun went dark for about 3 hours, and there was a great earthquake. Well, the Jews asking, "Who is this Son of Man? The Christ is supposed to live forever. What are you talking about being lifted up?" Well, Jesus knew that he was going to be resurrected. And for some reason, the Jews couldn't comprehend that, even though they knew that Jesus had spoke of his being resurrected, and he had demonstrated the power of the resurrection by resurrecting Lazarus just shortly before that. But when Jesus said, "Walk while you have the light," he was referring to the light that would continue because of his disciples, who were the sons of light. Not so much at that point, but after Jesus was resurrected, he revealed himself to them. And even the apostles couldn't conceive of Jesus coming back to life for some reason. And one of the first things Jesus said to them after he was resurrected, he said, "Oh, you senseless ones, and slow in heart to believe all the things the prophets said." And so then he began opening up their minds to the prophets and the Psalms. And so the light continued. The apostles were fearful and afraid. Peter denied even knowing Jesus. But then after they were infused with the Spirit on the day of Pentecost, becoming sons of light, they became Jesus' witnesses. But even that light eventually went out. And the apostles warned about that, didn't they? That wicked men would come in and influence the congregation and draw disciples off for themselves. And we know this happened shortly after the apostles died off. Their stalwart influence kept that darkness at bay, but it gradually overwhelmed Christ's congregation. And for many, many centuries, darkness prevailed. Historians even call a period of history the Dark Ages. And that was particularly so in the lands dominated by the church, Christendom. The ignorance was appalling and enforced. It was deliberate. And of course, the Bible virtually was inaccessible. But before Christ returns, there will be a resurrection of the truth, you might say. The light will begin to shine again so that people may know the truth and make an intelligent, informed decision. At some point, though, the light that is shining now will be overshadowed by darkness. For example, in the prophecy of Amos, the 5th chapter, Jehovah asks, "What will the day of Jehovah mean for you?" He prefaced that with saying, "Woe to those who are yearning, desiring, craving the day of Jehovah." Why? He said, the day of Jehovah will mean darkness and not light. So the Jews thought they were God's chosen people. Paul said that they had been entrusted by God with the sacred scriptures. And the Jews whom Jesus was speaking to in the temple there, they quoted from the law. It says the Christ is to remain forever. So they had a basis for knowing the truth. But it goes on to say there in that account in the 12th chapter of John that many of the rulers and the Pharisees actually believed Jesus, but they wouldn't confess him. Why? Because it says they loved the glory of men more than the glory of God. The rulers and the Pharisees had already agreed that if anyone confessed that Jesus was the Christ, they would be disfellowshipped, thrown out of the synagogue, cut off from the Jewish establishment, the Jewish society. They'd have a hard time doing business, making a living. It would be a very big hardship on them. But Jesus went through that, didn't he? And so did his disciples. And there is a large reward for them for following Jesus. In fact, Jesus went on to say, whoever loves himself will destroy himself. Whoever hates his own soul will find it. So loving ourselves in this old system is, it goes against human nature, doesn't it? We feed ourselves, protect ourselves, but we can love ourselves too much and not want to inconvenience ourselves or suffer in any way. But Jesus said, if you want to follow me, what do? You pick up your torture stake, you deny yourself in some fashion and follow me. But I was saying that the Jews were certain that they had the light, but they didn't. Not if they didn't accept Jesus. Jesus was the end of the law and the prophets. That all pointed to Jesus. And people of faith had to make the transition and follow Jesus. And the religious leaders were misleading them. Well, things that happened in Jesus' day, they're a pattern of things to come. We have a lot of religious leaders today, and it's kind of humorous. You hear, people like evangelicals talk about the church. What church are you talking about? The Roman Catholic Church? The Baptist Church? The Methodist Church? There are over 30,000 denominations and sects and cults. Which one of these are the church? Is it all of them? How could that be? Jesus, in his symbolic letters to the 7 congregations, he referred to the sect of Nicolaus. And he said that he hated it. He hated the deeds of the sect of Nicolaus. And Paul said that sectarianism is a work of the flesh. So God cannot possibly accept or bless all the different denominations and sects. Well, looking around on YouTube, I come across a few videos. I can't watch very much of it because they're so ridiculous and absurd. But more and more people are jumping on the end times bandwagon and using the scriptures, that Jehovah's Witnesses are familiar with. And of course, if you're new watching my videos, that's my perspective, the perspective of Jehovah's Witnesses. And I believe that we teach the basic doctrinal truth. And obviously, if a person doesn't know who God is, if they believe Jesus is God, like Jesus said, if the light that is in you is darkness, how great that darkness is. So we have to know at least the basic fundamentals about who Jehovah is and who Jesus is and what happens when you die. That's like the universal lie. Every religion teaches that you have some sort of soul in you that survives the death of the body. Hindus believe in, being reincarnated, and Islam talks about being in heaven with 70 virgins and all that, and on and on. Purgatory and hell. It's interesting. The Bible doesn't teach that at all. It is interesting that the ruler of this world, when he became the ruler of the world and the father of the lie, told the first lie to Eve and said, "You will not die." And he's perpetuated that original lie in various forms, and it's the foundation of virtually every religion. And it's a lie. How did Jesus come back to life? Did he have an immortal soul that survived the death of his body? His body was in the grave for parts of 3 days. Was Jesus alive somewhere in purgatory or heaven? How did that work? Well, the Bible says in many places that God resurrected his son. Jehovah brought him back to life. He was dead. He didn't resurrect himself. He couldn't resurrect himself. He was dead. Pretty simple, isn't it? God brought him back to life, just as Jesus brought Lazarus back to life and some other people as well. So Jehovah's Witnesses understand that, and we teach that. And, one of the most beautiful things is that Jesus said some people will never see death at all. Now, how is that possible? You have to die to go to heaven, don't you? Yeah, Jesus did. And if you follow in his footsteps to heaven, you must die too. But Jesus said some people will come out of the tribulation and never die. They will survive the end of this world. And again, that's the message of Jehovah's Witnesses, that when God's kingdom comes, people will have an opportunity to accept Jesus on his terms, put faith in him, and receive his protection when the ruler of this world is put away and his wicked world is utterly annihilated. But it's interesting, I kind of got off the track there, but watching some of these end times videos. But, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society really is the king of the end times prognosticators, because as many people know, that's the bedrock cornerstone of the teaching of the Watchtower, that Jesus Christ returned in 1914. And we've been in the last days also known as the time of the end, the final part of the days, different expressions in the Bible. We've been in the last days for over a century. And of course, Jehovah's Witnesses will point to World War I, and that lines up with what Jesus said. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and then there'll be food shortages, pestilences. Wow, the Spanish influenza was a killer. 30 million, 50 million, no one really knows, but it was horrible. And it swept the whole earth in just a matter of months. Much, much worse than COVID. But here's the problem. Jesus said, when you see all of these things, then know I am near at the door. When you see all of these things, and Jehovah's Witnesses should know that they haven't seen World War I. They have to be told that that was a sign, but nobody alive has personally witnessed nation rising against nation in 1914. And of course, the Watchtower teaches that the ruler of this world was thrown from heaven in 1914. And that since then, the prophecy's been fulfilled. Woe for the earth and for the sea, because the devil has come down to you, having great anger, knowing he has a short period of time. So according to the Watchtower, that short period of time is 109 years and counting. Oh, man. So my point of view is that these things have not occurred yet. The time of the end has not begun, but we're on the edge. We're hearing of reports of wars and rumors of war. People are talking about the possibility of nuclear war. And of course, they're warning us of another pandemic, maybe worse than COVID, which really wasn't that bad when you consider all the shenanigans behind that. But I can't talk about that, or I'll get another YouTube strike against me and get my channel taken down. So one of the things that people seem to be interested in Revelation is the mark of the beast. And there's a lot of talk about a digital currency being put in place, and people being implanted with chips and so forth. And it looks like that's the way they're going with a digital currency. They've been trying to go to a cashless society for some time. But that in itself would not condemn one in God's sight. Because in Revelation, I'll just read that couple of verses here. This is the 13th chapter of Revelation. It talks about this wild beast, and it says, it puts under compulsion all people, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the free and the slaves, that these should be marked on their right hand or on their forehead, and that nobody can buy or sell except a person having the mark, the same as the wild beast or the number of its name. And that is where it calls for wisdom. Let the one who has insight calculate the number of the wild beast, for it is a man's number, and its number is 666. So we can see that this digital world, they could control every purchase that a person makes, conceivably, and prevent one from buying or selling. But again, that would not condemn one to God. If we go up a few verses in that 13th chapter, it says that people worship this beast because it's provides it's their savior. Well, Jehovah's Witnesses can appreciate that there are some issues, some important issues that people who call themselves Christians of these 30,000 denominations don't really appreciate. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses don't take part in the political system. They view that as a compromise of their faith. if we're to be true to God's kingdom, how could we promote some political faction? So we don't vote, we don't run for political office, and all of that. How about when there is a war? Well, Jehovah's Witnesses will not allow themselves to be conscripted into the military and take up arms. Now, a few others take that stance as well, the Amish and Quakers, and Jehovah's Witnesses. During the big war, the last war, World War II, a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses went to prison in the United States. And of course, they went to the concentration camps in Germany because they wouldn't support Hitler's Nazi regime and take up arms. So that's an important issue, isn't it? And we have to, let's be honest, most so-called Christians have no issue with taking up arms and supporting their nation. You know, God is on our side and all that, and participating in the bloodletting. So the point I'm getting at, this mark of the beast will come with some sort of pledge of allegiance, if you will, to the beast. There'll be a contract. You have to agree to certain terms to get your stipend. Now, let's face it, if this system collapses, you're out of work, your money's worthless, you throw it in the street, and the government here is saying, we'll give you your monthly token, just click on the box here and promise that you will be loyal to the United Nations or whatever entity is set up as this world government. More than likely, the United Nations. I mean, it has all the bureaucratic infrastructure already set up. So that's the caveat. It will require Christians who know God, who really know God, it will require them to compromise their faith some way. And if they do, then they can eat, right? But go back to what Jesus said, whoever loves his soul will lose it. Huh? I want to eat. That's more important to me than anything. Here's an important point. The people who get this mark, they're doomed for eternity. That's really serious, because most people who've ever lived and died, they're still in the grave. Most of them have long been forgotten, billions and billions of people. They're going to be resurrected. They're going to come back to life on earth under the rule of Jesus Christ for the 1,000 years. They'll be given an opportunity to sort out their life and, live forever if they pass the final test. So it's a pretty severe penalty to be cut off and not qualify for a resurrection, to be dead permanently. That's what the lake of fire is, permanent destruction. Fire burns stuff up, you can't put it back together, and it's gone. And so that is what will happen to those who receive this mark. Well, why is it such a severe penalty? Up until then, even at the present time, Christians are required to be in subjection to the superior authorities. Paul talked about that in the 13th chapter of Romans. The superior authorities are the political governments. And it says that God placed them in their relative positions, and they serve as our ministers. He said, that's why you're paying taxes. So we receive a lot of government help. They provide roads and all of the infrastructure stuff and police protection, or at least they used to, right? So something will change when this beast comes back to life. That's really what happens in the 13th chapter. The head of the beast is killed, and then it comes back to life. And when it comes back to life, it will begin speaking as a dragon. So up until now, God has used the political governments to benefit Christians. And Jesus said the good news will be preached in all the earth. So that has been accomplished with the help of governments. Take the government of the United States, Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all the things that make possible the work of Jehovah's Witnesses. But when the time of the end begins, there's no need for that. All that will be done away with when the beast dies. When he comes back, they will no longer be the superior authorities whom we have to give allegiance to. Not allegiance, but to be in subjection to. Sorry. And what will happen? What will change? Jesus Christ will have taken over the kingdom. And so you'll have two choices. Serve Jesus Christ the King, or submit yourself to Satan the devil and his beast. He'll give you your bread and food, and he'll try to coerce you. If you don't clickety-click here, sign or whatever, you can't buy or sell. No eats for you, right? So that's why it will be such a severe penalty, because who would refuse submitting to Jesus Christ? Well, it won't be so easy. And the important thing is that we have to build up our faith now. As Jesus said, walk while you have the light, so that you may become sons of light. When Jesus, he had just instituted the evening meal, and he went with his disciples out to the Garden of Gethsemane. And here comes Judas, the traitor, and with him a mob with torches and swords, and the Roman soldiers who were acting in behalf of the empire. And Jesus said, why have you come against me as if I'm a thief or something? I spoke to you people publicly in the temple. Why are you coming after me now? And he answered his own question, because it's the hour of the authority of darkness. So God was giving the ruler of the world, the devil, a clear shot at Jesus. Because Satan's contention was he could break anybody. Remember what happened with Job? Satan said, well, you give this man everything. You protect him. Take it all away. You'll see he'll curse you to your very face. Well, Satan could say, well, Job is just a stubborn old fool, imperfect man. Give me a perfect man. I'll break him. And Jehovah gave him permission. It was the hour of the authority of darkness. He used one of Jesus' own apostles to betray him. And Jesus went through an excruciating ordeal. He could have gotten out of it. In fact, he begged his Father, take this cup away from me. I don't want to have to drink it and die this horrible death as a blasphemer against my Father. But he said, not what I will, what you will. And he knew it was Jehovah's will for him to go through that. And so he had submitted himself to that hour of the authority of darkness. Well, that same devil is still ruling the world, and he's not been thrown down yet. And when he comes down, it will be the hour of the authority of darkness. See how things repeat? And there is a Judas faction, a man of lawlessness, whom Paul said is the son of destruction. Jesus called Judas the son of destruction. So there'll be someone from among anointed Christians who will betray them. We see that tendency already in the Watchtower and their allegiance, you might say, friendliness with the United Nations. Remember, Judas led the Roman soldiers there. That was Satan's beast. The same beastly system is still operating, and it will more so during that 1 hour, Satan's short period of time. And so we're getting close. The thing we need to do now is what to say in Zephaniah, seek Jehovah Seek meekness, seek righteousness. Perhaps you'll be concealed in the day of Jehovah's anger. Thanks for watching.